We have seen Hello Docker desktop deployment object in single node cluster using Docker desktop and Kubernetes extension. Now we will be creating a cluster using minikube, and we will be we will be working on various objects of Kubernetes, such as services, deployment, ingress, lot, pods. So, but before that, we should understand what is minikube. So the name itself says minikube is mini cube is a local Kubernetes focusing on making it easy to learn and develop for Kubernetes. So here we need some prerequisites to work on that. So first I will write those prerequisites. So what we need is pre okay, first let me put heading. It's mini cube prereqs. First, minimum 2 CPUs or more, 2 GB of free memory, 20 GB of free disk space, then a proper internet connection, then the most important one, you should have either a container or a virtual machine manager, either container or a virtual machine manager, such as Docker, hypervisor, KVM, Podman, VirtualBox, that Oracle VirtualBox, VMware Fusion and Workstation. So here we will be doing two examples. So first one we will be working on with Linux, that is Ubuntu, and second example is going to be with Windows machine. Yeah, this is with Windows machine. First we'll do with Linux Ubuntu. So obviously for Linux we will take a container, a Docker, we'll take Docker, whereas for this one either we'll go with the virtual machine manager such as Oracle VM virtual box, or a simple Docker again, whichever uh, goes well, they will go with that. Okay, so for now first we will look into the Linux machine. Okay, so hands on, getting started with minikube. The first step, the first activity in this is to create a minikube cluster. So that's what we're going to do. So we will be working on Linux machine. You see that Linux machine, and so this Docker will also be a prerequisite in addition to these four. So in this, what is my first step? Step one is to create a minikube cluster. Okay, so now to create a minikube cluster, what I have to do is first I have to set up AWS EC2 instance, and that should consist of with uh, 2 CPU, 20 GB, and I'll go with the Ubuntu. Okay, so and once EC2 instance has been created, then we will log into that, login, and install minikube, and also we have to install Docker. So this is the first step, and once all done, then we will say minikube start. So these are part of step one. So first we'll finish with the step one, then we'll go to the step two. Okay. So let me get into the EC2 instance to begin. So this is my AWS, and in this I'm gonna create an EC2 instance. So launch instance, click on launch instance, and name I'm gonna give mini cube server. So Ubuntu, I'll go with the free one, 20.04, and canonical, that's AMI image ID. And here I'm gonna go with what's our requirement. Minimum requirement is 2 GB. So I'm gonna go with 2 GB and 2 CPU. So T2 Nano, T2 Micro is 1 CPU and 1 GB, and T2 Small 1 CPU 2 GB, T2 Medium 2 CPU 4 GB. I'll go with the T2 Medium, where it consists of 2 CPUs or more and 2 GB of free memory. I will go with the 2 CPU and 4 GB memory. Okay. Then T2 T2 medium is done. Let me create a key pair. I'll say mini cube key, and click on create a pair. And now let me edit network settings, scroll down. So it's mini cube SG, and same, copy here and paste it here. And the first security group role will keep it same, default one, so that we can do SSH into that machine and we can do required operations. And second one, we will make it uh, type all traffic, yeah, port range all, and source type my IP. That's it. These are the two. Absolutely fine. So nothing much. Let us launch. Okay. Storage volumes. One more thing is add volume. So at this moment we have one. So let me make it to, see, you see that it's a GP2, general purpose SSD. That is okay. So I'll make it into more than 20 GB. Okay. 30 GB. I'll make it 24 is also fine. That's it. That's fine. So now let me launch an instance. So meanwhile, let me get the, okay. So meanwhile, let me get into this, and here I'm gonna create a directory saying minikube, and here I will put my file. It's downloads, and fetch this one, Control X, and minikube, paste it here, make it, minimize that. Okay, by the time our instance is ready, yeah, minikube server is up and running. So let me go to this and pick this, copy this one, SSH command, and let me open git bash here, paste it, and log into the system, say yes, and sudo option I, clear the screen, ls. That's it, nothing much. Now it's time to fulfill our prerequisites one by one. So all these three, all these four were fulfilled. So next thing is installation of docker first, and after that installation of, yeah, here it is, installation of minikube, and then installation of docker. So let's install docker first, and then we'll install other one. So for that, I'll come here. Mm, so docker installation, docker installation ubuntu directly, install docker engine ubuntu. So this is installing docker engine on ubuntu. Okay, we have to select this, not docker desktop. You have to be very careful when doing this. It's docker engine. So first, let's uninstall if there are any old versions. Of course there won't be any old versions because we have freshly created that instance. So now let me use this method. So first let us set up the repository for that, and we need to update the app package index and install packages to allow app to use a repository or HTTPS. Let me copy all those things and directly paste it. And when it asks for permission, just say yes. And meanwhile, let's look into the other steps. Yeah, let me say. That's it. It will get installed by the time. Yeah, it got installed. Then after that, it's time to add Docker's official GPG key. So let me copy that and paste it here. So official GPG key has been added. Next, use the following command to set up the repository. That's it. The main thing, var lib docker, and that's also done. Then it's time to install the docker, but before that we have to update the index of the apt-get package or apt package, whatever the one which we are using. Then let us also give permissions to that keyrings docker. Okay, then that's also done. Index has been updated even after giving the changes. Now let me use the command for Linux. It's the two Ubuntu Debian based. Just copy this here, docker ce cli containered and all information. Okay, let me copy this and paste it here. Yes. Okay, processing triggers for mandb. Okay, it's done. Let me say docker start systemctl start docker systemctl enable enable docker, done. Then systemctl status docker. That's it, it's up and running, so no problem with this. So now let's, what's next step? Next is to install cube, install minikube. Okay, minikube. So to install minikube, let's get into the documentation of installation of minikube again. So this is minikube start. You see that this is the installation procedure, step 1. So whether you want Linux or Mac OS or Windows. This is for Windows. At this moment, we are not going to work with Windows for now. So I will go with Linux. So when you click on Linux, you have few options. Installer type. Either you could go with the binary or you could go with the Debian package or RPM. Anyway, we have only two options as it is. Ours is Ubuntu. Either I can go with the binary download and place it in the proper directory or use the Debian package. So I'll click on Debian package. It's much easier. So I'll just copy this and I'll paste it there. Curl, it's basically fetching that file, and once it is done, after that it's set up the unpacking the minikube and setting up the minikube. So now let me say minikube. Yes, it's there. Minikube, it's there. Minikube start. Now let's go through the minikube commands, basic commands. So minikube provisions and manages local Kubernetes. Basically, this is not for the production ready or production level clusters. This is for local Kubernetes clusters which are optimized for development workflows mainly. And so let's go through the commands one by one. Let me select. So first start, it starts a local Kubernetes cluster. Then we have status and we have stop. It stops a running local Kubernetes cluster. Then delete, it deletes a local Kubernetes cluster. Then dashboard, it accesses the Kubernetes dashboard running within the Kubernetes minimum cluster, within the minikube cluster. So then we have more images. For images, you have to give Docker and Podman and add-ons, config up and update context and all. So with this, our installation is successful. Now it's time to create our cluster. So from this terminal with admin, we can create our first cluster using mini start. Minikube start. So minikube automatically set to the Docker driver. Docker driver should not be used with the root privilege if you wish to continue as a root. Use force. Okay. Minikube start and driver none. Okay, now it's pulling the image and starting that. Let's wait for the Kubernetes minikubes cluster. So if we go through that, so minikube, this version is 1.29.4 on Ubuntu 20. So minikube skips the validation. Then the Docker driver should not be used with the root privileges. So we have done force. So then it started pulling the image. Now it's downloading the Kubernetes version 1.26.1 preload. So images, yeah, now images has been pulled. One is preloaded image KHV1H and the other one is KH minikube KIC base. So now once this is done, so it's basically creating a Docker container. So for that, what we require is minimum to minimum CPU, 2 core and you need a memory of at least minimum to minimum 2200 MB. So that's more than 2 GB, at least close to 2 GB. So that's the reason I have mentioned this here. You see that? I have clearly mentioned the requirements. The 2 GB of free memory and 20 GB of free disk space. These are minimum requirements to create your cluster. Of course, the cluster means it's not, you won't have a lot of machines. You'll have only one uh, uh, single node cluster. This is a single node cluster. So by the time, so a lot of action is taking place. So create, okay, done. It's done. So kubectl is also configured to use minikube cluster and default namespace by default. So all done. So no issue at all. So initially kubectl not found. If you need it, try minikube kubectl get ports option A. Okay, let's let me check that, because we kubectl get node. Let me install kubectl also. We did not install kubectl till now. So once the cluster has been created, so then we have to install kubectl also. So but before that, let's see the cluster. Let's see the cluster first. Let me clear the screen and let's see the cluster first. To see the cluster, as we need to use a kubectl. If you want to do any operation, we need to use kubectl as they have mentioned. So that's the reason now it's time to install kubectl. So let me write that here. So in addition to this, so rest all are done. Minikube start is also done. Then it's time to install kubectl. So let's get into the documentation for the installation of kubectl. Click and kubectl install Ubuntu, and install and set up kubectl on kubectl on Linux. So let me come to that. Install kubectl binary with kernel on Linux, or we'll use a native package management. Anyone is fine. Okay. And other one, yeah, here you should see install using native packagement. This is for Debian and this is for Red Hat. So I'll go with the Debian, and I'll go with the package management. So what we are doing now is we are installing the kubectl, because that's also very important prerequisite. So Docker as well as kubectl, okay, and minikube. So these are minimum requirements. So all are done. Cluster is also started, but installation of kubectl is left. Now we are going to do. So first we will basically update the app package and package index, and install packages needed to use the Kubernetes repository. We will do that first. Let me paste it. Yeah. Then by the time we will also, if we use Debian, okay, this is for Debian 9, so we are not worried. So then we have to download the Google Cloud public signing key. So let me copy this and download the public signing key, so that the proper secure way of connection will be established with the Google Container Registry, GCR. So I think okay, done. Let me put this also. Yes, this is also done. So Google security signing key is also done. Now add the Kubernetes apt repository. Let me add this repository, apt repository. So copy and paste it here. Oh, this is also done. Now finalize the installation of kubectl by updating the apt package index and with the new repository and saying the install kubectl and paste, and installation is going on. I'll say option Y apt get install. Okay, option Y is the kubectl. Yep. So installation of kubectl is going on. So kubectl has been successfully installed. So now let me mark that also. So now all prerequisites are being met. So we have Docker, kubectl, minikube, and we have our cluster running. So now let's cross check the cluster. So let me say kubectl and I'll say get po and option A. You see that all the pods all are running. So these are all kube system. Basically, these are all kube system pods. You can see that API server. This is API server of minikube, and this is controller manager of minikube. This is proxy of minikube, and this is scheduler minikube, and this is storage provisioner. So these are the etcd also. You see that etcd. So whatever we have discussed in let me show that. Yeah, so whatever we have discussed, similar kind of architecture will also be there in minikube. So this is our API server, then controller manager, etcd, scheduler won't be there, so remaining, and you will have a proxy. So all that things will be available in this. So that's what you're seeing here. Okay, now what will we do is we will keep this aside, and we will try to look into the cluster first. Okay, kubectl and get, I'll say node. You see that the node name is minikube and status is ready, roles are control plane, and 6 minutes 45 seconds ago. Absolutely fine, absolutely fine, brilliant. So our cluster is up and ready. So now it's time to run our definition files, create our definition files, and create our Kubernetes object. So before that, if you want to explore more, we can explore. Just 1 minute I'll take, and I'll take you through this. Okay, let me clear this. Let me say kubectl get ns. So these are the basic namespaces, the default namespace: kube node lease, kube public, and kube system. Kube system is specific to the kube system, consists of all pods that are related to the minikube or anything, any system. Okay. Then I'll say kubectl get deploy. So no deploy. Kubectl get svc, should not be any, but one default service will be available, which is the cluster IP type. Then kubectl get pods, we should have some pods, no resource pods, and kubectl get secret. So nothing, you'll find namespace, deploy, secret, service. So replica set also we have seen enough. So we have explored, nothing is there other than the namespaces, they are default. Okay, so no objects has been created so far, it's completely empty. So now we will begin with our first application deployment, that is hello minikube. That's what our first one. So hello minikube. So ls. So we have this minikube latest AMD 64.deb. This is the binary file of deb package. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is I'll get into cd home and ubuntu. So here I'm gonna create mkdir minikube. Okay, so cd minikube ls, nothing is there. So here I'm gonna create all my projects, all my minikube projects, direct minikube project directories. Okay, but before that, let's get into our uh, PPT. So here, where are we now? Yeah, minikube. This is the slide we are. So, so the first one, creating a minikube cluster is done. Now the second step is to create a deployment. So basically, if you create a deployment, it's gonna create a pod object and a replica set object also. So, and once you create the deployment, you have to view the deployments saying kubectl get deployments. And okay, now, and at the same time, if you say kubectl get pods, you could view the pods also. That's the second step, and you can use the config using kubectl config view. Okay, so the second step that we are going to do is to create our deployment. So let me write the same. The second step, first step one executed successfully. Second step is to create a hello mini cube deployment. Basically here we are gonna write our definition file for deployment, and then we will create the deployment object. So when you create a deployment object, by default you will also pods will be created and a replica set will also be created anyway. So let's begin. We will write our first, we will create our first deployment. Okay, let me say, let me clear the screen. So kubectl and create, we are going to use a create because we want to create. So create and deployment type, create deployment, and name is hello mini cube. And after that we have to provide the image is this image, it's k image equals to kic and base kic base / echo server. That's what echo server, and echo server tag is 1.4. So that's it. Let me execute this first and see what's going to happen. So successfully hello mini cube has been created. So now let me say kubectl get deployment. Deploy is fine. So hello minikube is the deployment object. That's one, it's ready and it's up to date and it's available, so no problem at all. So now let me check the pods, how many pods we have. Kubectl get pod, let me enter. Yes, hello minikube 77b6f68484 is one pod was created after, while we are creating the hello minikube deployment object. So 34 seconds ago it's been created. So that's hello minikube, and let us check the replica set. Do we have any replica set? Get rs. Yes, there is one replica set, that's hello minikube 77b6. It's the same, it's the pod name, and this is same. No, it's not same. The few more additional characters are there, and this is a replica set. It's a different object altogether, but the replica set here we have mentioned the replicas are one. So that's the reason all desired one, current one, ready one. So that's it. We have seen our we have our pod is running, our pod is running, container is running, and now if you want you can only look into the event deployment is running. So kubectl get pod, and this is that one hello mini cube. If you want to check whether it is healthy or not, kubectl, then you can say describe pod. It's just, I'll copy the name and I'll paste it directly. Yeah, yes. So you see that no issue at all. Created container echo server and started container echo server. So rest all is absolutely fine. It's no issue at all. And volumes, everything is mentioned. That's okay. So now let me clear the screen. And anyway, we'll see this step has been completed. That's the creating step 2. Hello minikube deployment is done. Now what's there for the step 3? So basically you can, if you have seen all those things, and the kubectl config view if you want, that also you can see. So second step is also done. Now let's move to the third step. What's there up? The third step. The third step I'm gonna do is create a service. The deployment has been created, pod is ready, replica set is ready. So now it's time to create a service. So what a service does, it exposes the pod to the public internet using a kubectl expose deployment hello node. So let's do that. We will give the same command and we will expose it to the, so the service that we are creating here is a node port type, and it's imperative way of doing the same thing. You can put it in a file and you can do that, but however we are doing it in imperative way with a command. So kubectl, so expose, and what we want to expose, deployment, and what's the deployment name? It's hello minikube, correct? Hello minikube. Then we'll give type, what type of service you want to create. I'm gonna go with node port. That's the simplest one. First we'll go with the node port, and we will, and at what port you want to have your pod running. So port 808, so 808, so that's where I want. So that's done. Now it's time to create our service, and service name we have given as hello minikube. Okay, expose. Okay, let me click execute. So service hello minikube has been exposed. So now let me say kubectl get svc. You see that? Hello minikube, and this is the cluster IP and port. We should access this port to get our application. Okay, we should access that. But before that, if you want to see something, if you want to describe this new service, you can do that. So kubectl describe and its service, then we have the name, that's hello minikube. So that's it. This is the information about uh, service and what it consists of. Namespace is default, I have shown you earlier, and then labels app equals to hello minikube. And what is the type of the service? It's a node port service. What is node port? Node port is basically mapping one port of the node with the other port of the node through these, through the IPs and ports of the nodes. So, and here you should see the target port, but what's important for us is endpoint. This is the endpoint. This is where we can access our application. Okay, then okay, that's it. So now let me get into the EC2 instance, connect and instances, and click on here. So 15.206.73.37, and here, so 50. Okay, now what I'll do, I'll take that IP, public IP, I'll paste it here, and it's 8080, correct? Okay, let me get into the instance. Yes, it's wrong. It's 15 to 206.73.37. That's the public IP of this. Let me paste it here, and 8080, that's what is our and here is, so now let me refresh it. There is some issue. Let me cross check that. Maybe let me check the pods. Service is running fine because endpoint we can see the endpoint absolutely fine. So what I'll do is I'll attach uh, security group to this. One more security group and inbound, edit inbound rules. So that's all traffic is my IP. This is also my IP, and I'll add one more rule, custom, and this is 8080 my IP, and let's save it. So that's it. Let me zoom it. Hello Kubernetes. That's it. Deployment, a proper way of deployment and expose